Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and Chag Sameach, and Elias and Eliza Michelle, so fabulous to be with you. Dan is right now leading Yizkor in the early bird service and will be joining us shortly. I'm so excited about this class, and I want to just start by thanking Elias for the idea. Last week, Elias came to me and said, "Hey, what about a class about the prophet Elijah?" And that ended up being a treasure trove. Can you just tell us, Elias, why you said Elijah? What drew you to Elijah?
Well, let's be honest here. So everything's in first grade at school, and I've done countless sessions with psychology, to go over this. There was another Elias in the class, and my first grade teacher decided that he will be named Eliyahu, and gave me the Hebrew name of Hillel. Who wants to be called Hillel? I mean, Hillel was a great, we have many teachings of him, but my whole life, why I'm not Eliyahu? So that it's all related to that.
Well,
Is something that I've been carrying on since first grade.
Elias.
But also, seriously talking, that's kind of serious, but more seriously, we say Eliyahu all the time. We teach Bar Mitzvah kids, and we say the blessings after the Haftarah with Eliyahu Navi and Pesach and everything, and we need to talk about this guy.
Great. I'm so happy that you brought it up. You have a nigun that's to begin the class with Eliyahu. You have a nigun to end the class with Eliyahu. So take it away.
All right. So this is a beautiful slow melody written by Craig Taubman, a great Jewish composer in LA, and it goes something like this. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Ya da 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 da. Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu HaTishvi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu HaGildadi, Bimhera beyameinu, Yahavo Eleinu, Mashiach, Mashiach, Mashiach and David. Ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da.
Wow. Elias, a double thank you for the topic, for the song. So before we do our prayer to thank God for the gift of learning Torah together, want to build on that song to kind of frame the basic issue of Eliyahu. Eliyahu is the most recurrent presence from the Hebrew Bible in Jewish ritual, in how we live as Jews. We saw him at our Seders last Friday night. We saw him at our Seders last Saturday night. We have always see him at a Brit Milah for a new generation of Hebrew males that are born, our sons and our grandsons and our great-grandsons. The Sandak sits in the Kisei Shel Eliyahu. This coming, every Shabbos and every holiday after the Haftarah, we name Eliyahu. Every Saturday night, we name Eliyahu. And anytime a Jew does Birkat HaMazon, anytime we do grace after meals, anytime we bench, we talk about Eliyahu. More than Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, more than Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, and Rachel. That one is for you. You're the only one I know who puts Leah first. And more than Moses and Aaron, and more than Saul and Solomon and David, Elijah is always there. And the question that and that haunting melody that you just sang from Craig Topman suggests a thoughtful, haunting, spiritual, anchoring thing. And yet, the question that presents itself is that Elijah in the Hebrew Bible is, and this is just pshat, this is just the Torah speak, is a hugely troubled presence. He is a war criminal. He is a mass murderer. He slaughters 450 people. And we don't do anybody a credit, especially ourselves, God or Judaism, to whitewash that. He's a mass murderer. And so, therefore, the very notion, this mass murderer, who, by the way, is fired by God, is welcome at our Seders and at our Britot, it's a question. Like, how do we get there? So, let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together, and then we will pick it up from there. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. והערב נא אדוני אלוהינו את דברי תורתך בפינו ובפי עמך בית ישראל, ונהיה אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולמדי תורתך לשמה, ברוך אתה אדוני המלמד תורה לעמו ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. Before we delve into the text, I just wanted to invite my beloved colleagues to respond kind of at a 30,000-foot level. I just wanted to sharpen the question in one way. We all know that any of us, all of us, in whatever field, we are defined by our worst moment, not by our best moment. And we all know that our worst moment has the potential and will cannibalize our best moment. And we saw this floridly with Chris Rock and Will Smith. Will Smith hits Chris Rock, and no one talks about Will Smith's winning the Best Actor award for King Richard. And the next news is he's banned from the Oscars for 10 years. Of seconds of bad judgment, and that's the first line in his obituary. And there's just countless examples where years of faithful service are undone by a few bad seconds. That's the general rule. And my question, and then I invite you guys to tackle this, is before we get into the text, at a high level, Elijah's bad moment is war crime. It's atrocity. He's a butcher. He's the butcher of Har Carmel. So how is it that our tradition sees fit to just kind of elide the fact that he's the butcher of Har Carmel? Why this is a departure from the normal rule. It doesn't happen to the rest of us. We couldn't be the butcher of Har Carmel in our own way and be invited to everybody's bris. So what is it, and how do you explain that the normal rule is suspended and his worst moment is a footnote, and now he's lovely Eliyahu Hanavi? So colleagues, it's all yours.
I think that's the norm. I don't think that's an exception. I mean, if you have about American presidents like Andrew Jackson, who was a butcher of Americans, and we have the presidents up on Mount Rushmore. The crimes that people commit, we like to hold on to our ideas of them more than reality.
Yeah, I'm gonna take it in a slightly different but similar direction, which is that I actually think that's a very modern lens that you're looking at this. I mean, what Elijah did was fulfill the written word of God, which is to not tolerate idolatry, right? So idolatry and idolaters are not okay in ancient Jewish law, and therefore what we today as moderns would see as a war crime, I think was very much seen as perhaps mugzam, right? But really it's about purifying the people and the land and returning us to the worship of God rather than the worship of Baal. Jezebel is upset about it,
right.
But you don't hear a Jewish voice that comes in until our rabbinic tradition definitely has some sense that he's more Pinchas, that
right.
The act was justified. The action is one that needs to be returned with a covenant of peace.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I mean, Jezebel was no saint.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So,
I think that's exactly the point that I'm making, is that the only voice that you hear that's really up in fury about it is one that we're up in fury against anyway.
Okay, time out. Michelle, on the you're arguing that, let's just read this text, and then we'll talk about whether...
I'm not arguing, just to be clear, the modern...
Yeah, I know, you're not in favor of war
it's
crimes.
Justified.
You're not pro-war crimes. But the question that you're raising, Michelle, is a narrow question, which is, to me, is the reaction of a modern. This is a war crime. This is
Yes.
atrocious. This is beyond the pale. This man is a monster. This man is a butcher. which is my read. Is
Yes.
that a Funkadelic 21st century read?
Yes.
Or is that the biblical pshat?
Yes.
And it seems to like you're arguing it's a Funkadelic 21st century read, and I'm arguing it's the biblical pshat. And I'm going to make two cases. Okay, let me just.
Yes,
let me
but
just,
don't simplify that much, Wes, because I think it's more nuanced than that, right? In the same way that our biblical text takes Pinchas and
Right.
says that his deed when he
Right.
slayed Zimri and Cosby was
Right.
the right deed, and
Right.
yet it cannot go unanswered. I think there's a very similar feeling about Eliyahu
Can I
here.
say
So-
something?
yeah, yes.
So a couple of things. Unfortunately, with your vision, the Bible and the Torah, it's filled with occasions like that. Think about the story of Purim, how
Right.
it ends. You know,
Right. All the bloodshed.
yes, like 30,000, I think is the number.
Yeah.
Okay, one thing. I have a question for you that at some point I want you to answer.
Yeah,
a
sure.
couple of weeks ago, you said, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, that you are not so much in favor of doing a ritual that doesn't speak to you.
Right.
Something like,
Right.
Etrog and Lulav and stuff like that. So, you may recall
Yeah.
that we all end, not you because you're in the chapel or somewhere else, at the end of Yom Kippur,
Right.
we end with Adonai
Huha.
Huha Elohim, screaming, I say it, and everybody repeats.
Yes.
That is what they say after they butcher.
Yeah.
the-
Yeah, we that was our whole.
So how does this, first of all, why is it put there
Yeah.
in Neila? We didn't butcher anything. We've been praying and starving the whole day. And
Yeah.
then, we say Adonai Elohim.
Yeah.
And second, why do you repeat it after me?
Well, okay. So first of all, that was the exact question 5 of us with Dan talked about this year. In Mincha Ne'ilah, we taped that show before Yom Kippur. That's exactly the question. So let's read it. I want to read it, and if you're
But please answer that.
yeah,
to
I'm happy
the
to read.
class.
Okay, so this is this contest on Mount Carmel. It's Elijah as the one prophet of God and 450 false prophets against Baal. Then fire from the Lord descended and consumed the burnt offering of Elijah.
Share
This
which
is on
page you're
page
on.
11. We're on page 11 of the handout, but I'll just read it. The wood, the earth, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. In other words, Elijah does this whole contest, and the false prophets can't get anything going. Elijah just says, hey, God, come on now, and boom, fire, and it's just a magical show of force. And then verse 39, and this is the verse that Elias is mentioning, and this is the verse that we say at the very end of Yom Kippur, 25 hours of fasting later. When they saw this, all the people flung themselves on their faces and cried out, the Lord alone is God, the Lord alone is God, Adonai hu Elohim, Adonai hu Elohim. Great. Right. Now, so what happens next? Let's just do a counter narrative, okay? What's a nice counter narrative? So Elihu could then, invite all the Israelites back to shul for Kiddush and could process, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about it? And what are you going to do? And what's the change it's going to make? And what's the delta? And how are you now going to recommit to Yahweh, the King, the true God, right? And what are you going to do to rid yourself of the Canaanite stuff and Baal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? That would have been leadership. Right, but here's what he does. Then Elijah said to the people, seize the prophets of Baal, let not a single one of them get away. They seized them, and Elijah took them down to the Wadi Kishon and slaughtered them there. By the way, the word is Vaish Chatem Sham. He slaughtered them. He's a slaughterer. He's a butcher. 450. He could have taken them to the Adelson Community Hall, his people, and talked about what difference will this make. He could have talked to them about how do you increase your devotion to God. He could have talked about the challenges of getting rid of Canaan idolatry, but instead he slaughters them. Now, say just so modern. Okay, so I want to say no. Guess who slaughters false prophets? Guess who slaughters prophets? Jezebel. Jezebel slaughters the prophets of Yahweh. Guess what happens to Jezebel? She ends up getting thrown off the roof by Yehu, the general, and she ends up getting eaten to death by dogs, so you couldn't even recognize her. So this woman's act of killing prophets is in the Bible itself. That's her end. Thrown on the roof, torn apart. In other words, the Bible, and one last thing, and then I'll stop. In the very next chapter, which we'll look at, Elijah is fired. He's fired by God. So I'm still wondering, what is he doing at our Seder table?
Okay, so the fired by God we're going to get to because
Yeah.
it's the rabbinic take on that is very different than what you're going with right now. But can I just say Jezebel, if you look through a biblical lens,
Yeah.
she slaughters the true prophets of God.
Right, and he's lowering himself to her level
Well,
by slaughtering prophets.
As Moses did post the golden calf, no less than Moses slaughters. I mean, I
you know,
just,
my view,
I-
Michelle,
I feel like
I like you, and usually I'm convinced by
I'm
you,
not
but
saying I
but
am
I have a hard time
affirming.
today. I have a hard time today.
By the way,
Because
so-
it's exactly what Wes you are saying. You know, he has shown the other prophets, the false prophets, what
Right.
Adonai could do.
Yes,
that
the
was enough.
magnanimity,
That was
like-
enough. Why to slaughter
Why slaughter?
400?
Right, so
but
I just think,
the
Michelle, I don't
people
think we
flew
do
the-
him-
Hold on.
We don't
The
do him or the
people-
tradition a favor.
The people flung themselves
Yeah.
on, and they say Adonai Hu Elohim.
Right.
The prophets of Baal is a different. That's another category of people. They are continuing to cling to the or at least their job is
Right.
to worship Baal. You've got to expunge idolatry. I'm just
Are you
looking
really
through the
defending
ancient
this?
lens.
I'm with Michelle.
I'm just looking through
You're
the ancient
defending-
lens.
You're
going on
defending
today?
the butcher of Mount Carmel.
Okay, not defending, but we have a biblical lens where God instructs the people to slaughter idol worshippers. That is literally God's instruction. So then we have to be looking at it within that context. Now, Elijah
What-
does.
It is
break
2-2.
from
2-2.
tradition.
Then what's
Yeah,
your
wait.
position?
Can I just
Then
make it?
bring some light, Lord
Yes,
Nelson.
before you do, right? Before you do, okay. Can I just say, our mandate as a people, when God first connects with Abraham, is la'atzot tzedakah u'mishpat, to do justice and righteousness. And the prophets that we really revere, like Avraham Avinu, has a conscience, and I think it's really dangerous to role model. It's okay to not have a conscience, and it's okay to follow orders, right? Following orders never ends well. So I don't understand why you're justifying a following orders rationale. Because that's all your defense basically
Are you
boils
looking
down
for the
to
prophets of Baal?
He's following orders, and that never ends well.
No,
He's
not
not
that he's
following
following
orders.
orders.
He's the
not.
opposite
He's
of
breaking
following
orders.
No, you're saying that he's following
We're
God's
saying-
order. But anyway, we don't have to get hung up on this. I don't see how you can defend the indefensible. I don't see how you can defend a war crime. Lord Nesson, earn your title, Lord, and tell me I'm right.
Well, first of all, I'm kind of glad that I came a little bit late to the energy here. No, I guess I'm with you, Wes, and Michelle. When you mentioned that Moshe, it's really when the earth swallows up, it really God is the one opening up the earth to
Right.
swallow up the people. So Moshe is not doing that.
Right.
Right, and Wes, I agree. It is unconscionable. Okay, right. In other words, the point has been proven. Calling out day and night, night and day, Baal, 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 it doesn't work. And then everybody that's there that witnesses this is clearly seeing, Adonai Hu Elohim, all the people, everyone sees this, right? And so when then all these prophets are slaughtered, it's the worst potential, it's the worst behavior possible.
Right.
I know, Elise, you
but
disagree
then,
with me, Michelle.
then you were
Yes.
saying that God has done, but here clearly the text it says, and he
Yeah.
slaughtered.
Elijah
Right,
did.
Elijah did it. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So that's what Elijah did
Unconscionable.
here. What Elijah did here, I think, is indefensible. I
So
don't
by the
think
way,
what he
so the
did-
way okay, wait, let's just so we don't. I just want to get out of this little.
I'm not
Yes.
defending. So I just want to be really clear.
Yes.
I'm not defending Elijah or saying that what he did was good.
Okay.
What I am saying is that your paradigm that somehow what he did was beyond the pale in terms of the biblical imagination and understanding of what a prophet is and what
Right.
a prophet is supposed to do. The zealotry for God is real. This is an extension. He is
Right.
perhaps like Pinchas,
Right.
a little overzealous,
Little over,
but
yeah.
he is. But actually, he is the natural.
So can I just
con-
say, just think Putin, think Russia, think Ukraine. I just think this is like, and I'll come back to answer your question, Adonai Elohim. When I say Adonai Elohim, I'm both thinking about when can I get my cup of coffee, and I'm thinking about, Lord, there is a real danger in groupthink. There is a real danger in groupthink. And one of the main purposes of conscience and religion is that we don't fall prey to it. We don't want to become Hitler's willing executioners. Right? There's a serious danger of becoming Hitler's willing executioners by being silent, by quieting our conscience, etc. I mean, all of us have seen these stories of people in Russia today who defend the war, who argue it's not a war, it's a military operation, they're denazifying, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a serious danger of groupthink, and I think the charge of Adonai Hu Elohim said right before a mass slaughter is that we never do that. That our religion, like if Adonai is our Elohim, that it's to rouse our conscience so that we don't do
Can I
that.
say something and then we should move on to the
Yeah,
next
no, we'll
topic?
move on,
Michelle,
yes.
from now on, I
Yes.
promise every single song of Shabbat Alive will be in a lower key so you don't slaughter me. I'm concerned
so I
about
wanna-
that.
okay.
So
Wait,
I
let's
promise
say-
I'll do well to you.
Yes.
I feel like there's an important thing
Yeah,
because
we're-
one of the things that sort of troubles me, and I don't, I'm not sure how well this fits into a modern narrative, but I think if you're going to try to make that leap, then it's important to say that the distinction, it's not the prophets of Baal through themselves on this. It's very clear that it's just the people, A.
Right.
And that's an important
Right.
addendum because what you have, if you're living in Elijah's mindset, you have a lot of people that are putting forth harmful information that's going to lead people to make bad life choices. And it actually endangers, if you live in Elijah's mindset, that information that the prophets of Baal are putting forward, they are very subversive, they are very persuasive, they are going to turn the people again away from God, and that's going to cause literal damage. So killing them actually is an important life-saving measure for the people. And that's how Elijah
Elisa,
Can I say
by the
something?
way,
you
Matt,
just draw a
in
straight
this
line
book,
from that. You just draw a straight line from that to defending January 6th.
But wait,
That's
Daniel
January
Matt,
6th.
Daniel
This
Matt
was
in
a
this
false
book,
election.
Wes,
This is a big lie. We're gonna bring violence.
I'm
I just
not
think
defending.
that's the
I'm just saying
abandonment of civilization.
We have to, when we look at Elijah and we're trying to understand our tradition, if we just demonize him, what are we going to end up with? You're going to take him out of the Seder. You're going to take him out of everything. We're going to lose that connection. I think there's a value to him within a complexity
Navi.
Right.
of possibility.
And
Can I
also,
say something?
Daniel
Can I
Matt,
say
here in
something?
this
Just-
book
yes.
that you
let's
asked
not
us to
let's
read
not lose
says the
sight
same.
here. Let's not lose sight that Jezebel was Phoenician. All right, she wasn't Jewish,
Correct.
and all these prophets of Baal were not Jewish either. So this is like, sorry, I'm with you, Wes. This is like attacking other people. This is not Jewish people who are saying let's praise another set of gods. No, this is different people with different beliefs
Yes.
and different.
Okay, so
and
And
But
if you
just
look
to
at the
move- in order to
context,
just
wait,
move-
if you look at the context,
Yes.
because Daniel Matt actually brings this up, the challenge of the generation that is preceding
Right.
Elijah is one in which there has been a lot of marriage with women who have been idol worshippers, like
Right.
Jezebel, who have led the men, quote unquote, astray from worship of God. These
Right.
ideas actually have power,
Right.
and dislodging them has been profoundly
Right.
difficult
Right,
in
so-
this time.
Got it. So I want to move on to the next vignette, but I just want to say one thing of what Elijah did, and not to spoiler alert or to kill this series, but the Elijah that we bring to our Seder tables is not this Elijah. The Elijah that we bring to the Seder tables is rabbinic Elijah, who's a caring, loving person. And so the mystery and miracle of Elijah is that he changes and he grows and evolves in ways, by the way, that I don't think the rest of us humans are entitled to by society. Whereas if we do that kind of atrocity, we don't get to, have a whole new second act where we become Mother. Elijah does, but the Mount Carmel butcher is kind of reduced to a footnote in terms of the rabbis of the Talmud, and we'll see this the next chapter about rabbinic Elijah. He becomes soft and caring and gentle and etc. So he changes. That's the Elijah that we bring. But I want to come back again to the Pshat. I want to, Michelle, maybe if you'll read the story on page 12 and 13. This is the story of what happens to Elijah next. Of course, he's on the run, and Jezebel wants to kill him, and he goes into the desert, and he's given some miraculous, food that allows him to go 40 days, and he ends up going now to guess where? Moses' mountain, the mountain of God at Horeb. There he went into a cave, and he spent the night. We're on page 12. There's just a few paragraphs. Michelle, you read, then the word of the Lord came to him.
Then the word of the Lord came to him. He said, "Why are you here, Elijah?" He replied, "I am moved by zeal for the Lord, for the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, and they are out to take my life. Come out," he called, "and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And lo, the Lord passed by. There was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks by the power of the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a soft murmuring sound. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his mantle about his face and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then a voice addressed him, "Why are you here, Elijah?" He answered, "I am moved by zeal for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and have put your prophets to the sword. I alone am left, and they are out to take my life."
Okay, so let's just pause for a second before the end. So God asks Elijah the same question, why are you here, twice. So if you just diagram this, why are you here? And then he says, I'm the only super zealous one, and no one else is zealous, and no one else gets you, and I'm just super zealous for you. Then you have this experience where is God, and not in the fire, and not in the storm, and not in the thunder, but in Kol Damamadaka, the still small voice. Okay. Then, next time, hey, Elijah, why are you here? And he gives the same answer, unchanged by the revelation of God in Kol Damamadaka. Elijah just doesn't have that band on his frequency. Okay? Pick up the rest of it.
That is another big connection of Eliyahu. Unetane tokef, bekol de mamadaka.
Right.
Taking from here.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, Michelle, finish it up.
The Lord said to him, "Go back by way you came, onto the wilderness of Damascus. When you get there, and anoint Hazael as the king of Aram, and also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, as king of Israel, and appoint Elisha, son of Shaphat of Abal Mecholah, to succeed you as prophet. Whoever escapes the sword shall be slain by Jehu, and whoever escapes the sword of Jehu shall be slain by Elisha." By the way, how are you thinking God feels about slaying?
Keep going.
Right
Keep going.
now.
Let's read one more.
Just, not to make a point.
Yeah. I will leave. I'm happy to engage this. I will leave in Israel.
I will leave in Israel only 7,000. Every knee that has not bent to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him.
Great.
Says God.
Yes, perfect. So now
Mic
let's
drop.
talk about.
Wait, hold on.
No, not mic drop. Not mic drop.
Brian,
The opposite of mic drop.
apologies.
That's the beginning. That's the beginning of his work, not the end of his work. Okay, so what happens here? Just what is, colleagues? What's your sense of the pshat of what Michelle just read? What?
God believes it is important to kill idol worshippers. I believe is the shot of that text.
Okay, we'll get to that. And no. We'll get to that. No,
It's
and
not
what happens?
pretty. It's not
No,
pretty.
Okay,
let's
but time out.
Wes,
Why
let's
then?
follow- let's follow Elisa's.
Why then? What happens to Elijah? What's the pshat of what happens to Elijah?
But what happens
What's
to
the
Elijah
shot
is
of-
because
No, I have a
he's
question for
selfish.
Elisa.
He's
Yes.
looking only
Do
at
you
himself.
believe in God, Elisa?
So this is, I think, one of the biggest challenges of our tradition and the challenge of our class, which is how do you hold the most horrific lived religious zealotry and a beautiful religious tradition that really is supportive for us. And I think God here, right, Elijah doesn't change. Elijah comes to this place and it doesn't matter. Actually, God's revelation of God's self, and God's not in the fire and God's not in the wind, but none of that actually moves him. His answer remains the same before God's appearance and after God's appearance. He's the same. He's unchanged. But God,
And therefore, is he not fired? Is that the pshat?
no, God says, "I'm
Oh
with
my
you.
God.
I'm gonna kill all these people. I believe."
Wait,
in all the
Elisa,
people that don't-
respond my question, please. Do you
did.
believe in that God that
I
kills
did.
people and say, kill whoever doesn't worship me?
We read this text every year. I read these texts every year. If I wasn't okay with holding the complexity within these texts, I wouldn't have become a rabbi. I
Just to
wouldn't
answer
believe
my
these-
own question, I feel
Right.
more comfortable with saying this guy butchered 400 people than saying this was his wish.
But
So
he's
anyway, but-
not fired
Okay.
because of the people he kills on the mountain. Indeed, God is actually saying, "Go out and do more.
Right,
Do
right.
more.
Okay,
Do more."
So there's two issues here. First of all, what happens to Elijah? Second of all, God's voice. Okay.
Right.
So the answer to God's voice, I mean, from the Torah itself, is "Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of the universe judge justly?" I mean, we know the answer to this. This is in our toolkit.
You're saying
it's called
you need
Avraham
Elijah
Avinu.
to stand up to God and say you're wrong.
Yeah. There's a man named Abraham who does that. He's, by the way, the founder of our faith.
Who, by the way, is
And
not
Abraham-
very successful.
But that's
Abraham
not
role-
Elijah's story.
And Abraham role models, far be it from you, shall not the judge of the entire universe judge justly, right? And Elijah, and this, by the way, this is on page 31 of this. The Daniel Mat brings midrashim far wiser and older than me, who say that Elijah gets replaced because he only has that Elijah gets replaced because he only has one move.
Yeah.
He only has one voice. He's unchanged. He's just Mr.
Okay,
Zill.
but to be fair, reading, if you're going to quote this book, Daniel Matt says he gets fired because he's looking internally. What's this about for me? He has forgotten the role of a prophet. And the role of the prophet is to say, your people, God, need you. Right. And if you want to quote Daniel Matt attributes this moment when he gets fired, or rather when he's told that he has an end to his leadership. He's not relieved of his duties.
He said eventually he's be punished, but for now Elijah is to be relieved of his prophetic duties.
Correct, but he's given a task to do before he does that, by the way, which has to do with continuing to expunge idolatry from the land.
Right.
And then after that, he says, you know what? You're not going to be the guy to go to the distance, just like Moses is not the guy to go
I have a question for you. Very important question.
The desert.
Yes.
Very important question. You were saying that it wasn't Elijah the one who slaughtered, that was God's wish. How is it possible God then...
No, Elijah definitely slaughtered them.
Okay, but you were saying that you guys were saying that was what God wanted.
I'm not sure.
How is that possible? Well, let me finish. How is it possible that the same God who wants that, and Elijah does that for him or she, ends up saying, you're not good anymore?
Right. I'm not sure, by the way, that in the moment God would have said, please go and do this for me, any more than with Pinchas, with Zimri, and that God would have said, please do this. That said, here in the end, if you want to use this as a proof text, this is actually God coming along after the fact and saying, I'm okay with what you did. It's about expunging idolatry. No. So I just think on the pshat of the text, you can't say that he's fired because he did the slaughter. That's it. That's my one small point.
Okay. Mr. Nesson.
So I guess I'm kind of with Michelle, because I think what's happening here is that God, what you said was God is firing him because when God reveals himself in all these ways and it doesn't change, that's that's the one move that he has. I'm zealous for you. That's it. That's why he's fired, because he's incapable of
modulation.
Of modulation, just of seeing a different perspective.
Right.
So I think that's what's happening.
And I did want to say,
and
by the way,
let me say one other thing quickly. So when we said about Pinchas, I mean, Pinchas gets his breach shalom, and nobody has any idea what that means. But I think it's actually related to shalom meaning shleimut, that Pinchas needs to spend the rest of his life becoming whole again. And I think that what's happening here is that Elijah's not capable of becoming whole again, and therefore he has to be replaced.
Right. Okay. So I want to, just so that we're running out of time here, I want to just bring out. I
have to say this. First grade teacher, you name a Hillel. Why didn't you name me Eliyahu? So much Jews in this stuff.
Yes.
I'll never forgive you.
One last thing, and then I want to share one last text, and then I want to that you could do a lot of inside baseball. Inside rabbi, hermeneutical text stuff about Elijah. I want to bring this back to our Seder table, to our Britot, to our service now, where we're bringing Eliyahu in. But before we do, there is the very end of Eliyahu's life, or questionable end, when he leaves the pages of history in the Bible, was the fiery chariot scene. So we're on page 15. Elisa, would you please read that? Read from verses 9 through 14, which is Elijah's last verses in this 2 Kings story.
As they were crossing, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" Elisha answered, "Let a double portion of your spirit pass on to me." "You have asked a difficult thing," he said. "If you see me as I am being taken from you, this will be granted to you. If not, it will not." As they kept on walking and talking, a fiery chariot with fiery horses suddenly appeared and separated one from the other. And Elijah went up to heaven on a whirlwind. Elisha saw it and cried out, "Oh, Father, Father, Israel's chariots and horsemen!" When he could no longer see him, he grasped his garments and rent them in two. He picked up Elijah's mantle, which had dropped from him, and he went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. Taking the mantle which had dropped from Elijah, he struck the water and said, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" As he too struck the water, it parted to the right and to the left, and Elisha crossed over.
I just have something on a personal note. Our daughter is named Yardena Aderet for this verse. She's named for this verse, right? Yardena because of the Jordan, and her middle name is Aderet, which is the mantle of Eliyahu that now is held by Elisha.
So you named her after a murderer? Is that what you
I named her. No.
Lord Nelson.
No.
Lord Nelson.
No. I named. No, Dan. To be
Epic
fair,
Nelson.
I named her after a murderer's mantle, not after a murderer.
Epic
There's all the
Nelson.
difference in the world between a murderer and a murderer's mantle. A mantle.
Oh
mantle,
my
not the
God.
murderer.
You outdid yourself.
I apologize, by the way. We
Dan,
all loved you.
Oh my God. That's after 10,000 minions we've shared together. You just stick the knife in. I'm so vulnerable and exposed, and you stick the knife in. Okay, what is the meaning of this fiery chariot? And by the way, there's answer anything you want, but what's interesting is that one verse that I've never understood about it, and as you can see, because I named my daughter after the mantle, I've always loved this story and been drawn to it, but here's the verse, part of it I've never understood. As they're crossing, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I can do for you before I am taken from you." And that is, and that's a question that anybody who's leaving the world wants to know. When our loved ones are last and they're on the pillow and they're surrounded, what can I do for? What can I give you? Right? That's a human question.
I give you my shot.
No,
here?
I didn't answer the question yet. Elisha answered, "Let a double portion of your spirit pass on to me." So I want, like your ruach, I want times two. I need times two to get through. This is the part that I've never understood. Elijah says, "You have asked a difficult thing." Hikshita lishol. Hikshita lishol. What you're asking for is difficult. And then he says, "If you can see me when I'm being taken away, then you can have that double portion." And so all of this is open to for your interpretation, but I'd especially appreciate what your views on "you have asked a difficult thing." Like wanting a double portion of our beloved Father's spirit, a double portion of our beloved Mother's spirit, that seems very human. Why is that a difficult thing? But anyway, colleagues, explain.
Yeah, I was going to go somewhere else, but then I'll come back to it. To me, the pshat of this, following my rabbinical colleagues, this looks like, when somebody is writing a book and then that book is incomplete and somebody else comes and finishes it, this is what looks to me. It's like this is a undeserved reward for somebody who didn't deserve. Like this idea that he's been taken to the heavens by the chariot. There's so many other people in the Bible that deserve that more if that is seen as somebody like a reward. I'm going with God and I'm going to be forever special because
Right.
I don't die.
Right.
To me, that is completely out of place. It's as if somebody else came and wrote this part.
So, by the way, that is if you got the Daniel Mapp book, Becoming Elijah, and just real quick, what do you think of the book?
Epic.
Not as epic as Dan's comment, but epic.
I haven't started it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I love what he does, and particularly what he does in
Right.
the transition, which will help get us out of our ditch.
Okay,
that we're in right now, if you
this
give
is
me
on the cover
chance.
of this book is exactly this moment, and you're saying that it's undeserved. Why does Elijah get this, primo treatment?
Can I jump in?
Yes, please.
So I actually think if we're going to take this seriously, I believe that Elijah is able to see and experience spiritual realities that other people aren't. And what he's saying to Elisha is, I can only give you what you can hold, what you can manage. And so if you have the spiritual vision that you're able to see my journey, then you already got it. Then you're going to be able to do the downloading, and you're going to be able to do the spiritual work, and you're going to be able to live it on. But if not, there's nothing that I can do to help you, because you have to be on your own spiritual journey, and you have to be enough of a spiritual being that you can take this on. And that's up to you, not up to me. So if it's up to me, I'm giving it to you, but you have to be up to the challenge.
Yeah, and
I like
Daniel
that.
Matt actually fills in a beautiful thing where he says the double portion is not necessarily I want twice as much
Right.
as you have, but it's about being his son. It's
Right.
about, that's what the firstborn son gets, and that's super helpful because in many ways, right, all of us try to live and embody the values of our parents, but also try not to live our lives as them. We have our own legacy that we have to do, and perhaps that's part of what Alicia
Yeah, that's
is
beautiful.
saying
Both of you were
to
saying, but
him.
it doesn't reflect
And-
anything to what I say. Why, for example, is not Moses taken in a chariot of fire?
But that's
Right,
not
so-
the question of this
right.
text. We're just
That's
looking
my
at
question.
Elijah.
It's
I know,
really
but
my question.
that's too
You're
big of a
pulling a
question for
West,
this class.
which is
Right.
that's what I did to Elisa.
You sat down once in his
Yes,
chair,
yes.
and you did all these questions to
Yes.
poor Elisa.
So I did it
so
once,
the
but I read
prefiguring,
it
the
again.
thing
Yes.
that's missing is something that Daniel Matt beautifully fills in, where he says that after the prophets of Baal and after that slaughter, Elijah's next move is actually a quiet prayer by himself. And it was actually a brilliant and fascinating insight to see that actually, although it appears when Elijah's on the mountain that he's not doing any personal growth, right? There is this moment in which he understands that his Torah and the fact that he can't do, like he is this prophet of zeal. That's who he is. And that's why we have the need in that quiet prayer. He understands you do have the need for somebody who has a different Torah in the same way that when the people go into the land, they need not Moses, but Joshua. And that double portion that he's getting, he says that's difficult because my Torah is different than your Torah, and your time is going to demand a different Torah than my Torah.
Can we just end before we get to, here's the penultimate question, and then the ultimate question. The penultimate question is, in what way is this fiery chariot, which is kind of unique, it's kind of sui generis in the Hebrew Bible. I mean, he's the only character who gets swirled away by a fiery chariot. In what way is that an appropriate response to his life? And then the second question is, and we've got several more weeks of Elijah to go from the Daniel Math book, but what are we to do with this complicated? I'll just use complicated. To me, Butcher of Mount Carmel, but given all your ambivalences, I'll just call him complicated. You can never go wrong with complicated, complex, layered. What are we supposed to do with this layered, complex personality in our lives, like when we say the blessing after the Haftorah today? So, in what way is the chariot of fire an appropriate response, and what do we do with Eliyahu? We'll just go around real quick. Elisa?
So I think that we encounter Elijah with all of our preconceptions and our own complication. And the chariot of fire invites us to consider that there may be a more deep and profound spiritual connection that he has with God that potentially he has to teach us. And I think he leaves us like Elisha, being like, if we have the vision to see more depth spiritually, then we might be able to download some of his blessings.
To me, this Elijah doesn't speak to me at all. At all. I cannot wait for 2 weeks from now for the rabbinical Elijah. All right? That's the one I usually pray to, and not this one. And to me, it's still a puzzle why this image of the fire, with the book, the cover of the book, it gets just for Elijah, thinking if this is kind of image that we see it as a reward for somebody who has done well and now it gets to heaven. Why him and not others who deserve it even more?
Lord Desson.
So, Elias, I'm thinking what you just said, and I'm thinking about the fact that do we know that being taken in a fiery chariot is actually a reward? I mean, when we think about Elijah, it's really about his fiery personality, and fire can go both ways. It can be a depth of spirit. It can also be uncontrolled. So there's, I think, a combination going on, the controlled and uncontrolled. I think of that old movie about the runners, and the image of chariots of fire, right? And what was that? Yeah, that's right. But you think about that movie, and you think about what was the depth of that movie? It was the depth of the very complex, layered spiritual issues that go along with people that choose a certain path.
We need zealots in every age. I mean, we need people actually who have passion to fight for what they believe are right. We need them today in Mariupol. We needed them in World War II when the American soldiers went over and liberated and redeemed. You need people who have righteous vision and who are willing to do it. And you need to be very careful about them and make sure that that's not where they stay, because the world cannot stay in that place. We need to move to a place of redemption, and I too can't wait and look at the rabbinic Elijah, because I think the rabbis really give us that sense of how he grows by confronting in every ritual moment his zealotry and seeing that the world actually is different now than the world that he confronted.
Well, my last comment before we do the second and last nigun is I think we don't get the Elijah resonance unless and until we deeply account biblical Elijah a profound moral failure. If you don't see him as a profound moral failure, then what's this whole project for, right? And if you're going to bring in the modern world is you need people who stand up to Hitler in Germany. You need people who stand up to Putin in Russia. And you need people who, when the standard in the world is, I kill prophets, see Jezebel, you don't respond by saying, oh, I kill prophets too. Actually, I'll kill even more. You killed 100 prophets, I'm going to kill 450 prophets. What you need is la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat, somebody who can transcend the muck and transcend the morass and say justice and righteousness. And someone who can say to God, when God says, I'm going to kill another bunch of thousands, somebody who can say, like Abraham said, how dare you? Chalila lecha. This is, far be it that the judge of the world should judge justly. And the fact Elijah doesn't do it and can't do it and is all rage is a profound moral failure. But the reason we bring him into our personal lives at our choicest moments is because he grows. Nigun.
Yeah, so this, thank you, Wes, for bringing this class. It's so rich. I love it. I grew up with this melody in Argentina. It's much more fiery in a way to end the class, and it goes like this. Eliyahu Hanabi, Eliyahu Tishbi, Eliyahu Gildadi, Eliyahu Hanabi, Eliyahu Tishbi, Eliyahu Gildadi, Bimechera Yavo Eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Bimehera Yavo Eleinu, Mashiach ben David.
Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach.